The warm Tairoshi sun filters through the garden canopy. Darien and his company have been treated well, and as the tourney nears, he's doing all that he can to prepare for it, seeking to bring his family name, honor, and prestige. But he's not the only one. There are many among his ranks that wish to partake in the tourney too. However, they will need to prove themselves, as will Darien. Entry is not a given. One must be proven worthy. And visiting the tourney grounds, Darien stands with Cyrene. Knights, what you do not know, ask humbly to be taught, urged Cyrene. Together we represent the captain. Let us prepare for our glories. She turned to Darien, eyes gleaming. Command us. And so, Darien instructs them to watch out for their opponents, to learn their weaknesses, a choice that should help his captains out in the coming battle. Next, Darien visited the forge. The warmth of it was enough to keep most guests away. Yet when Darien opened the door, he found the farrier yawning over his work table. Not many seemed to have approached him. The man quickly straightened, clearing his throat with an audible cough. I can offer you the best horseshoes, ready for the tournament, he suggested, displaying a more than impressive collection. And for Darien, only the best would do, qualifying him and his stable for the race that was yet to take place. Yet since her early speech, Darien had not seen Cyrene. Her recent absences had not gone unnoticed, nor the many servants turned away from her door. At the Tonia's request, Darien entered her lodgings. Gloomy half-light hung over a floor strewn with rent garments, shattered objects, and a knight's blood. Tears became red on Cyrene's cheeks. I cannot go out there, she sobbed. I can't face them, not again, not now. Please, my captain, please spare me from the tourney's fray. Cyrene was not only Darien's knight, but one of his oldest friends. He would do anything he could to give her the confidence she needed. Perhaps a little coin would help. It certainly seemed so. Wandering back to the tourney grounds, Darien happened upon a falconer, from whom he could learn a thing or two. And now it was time for the race to begin. But before it could, Darien had a bet. As far as candidates went, Darien's best friend, Cyrene, was a fair candidate, and a good choice in his mind. And as for his final bet, Darien would place it upon his own horse, Prince, who he hoped would seize victory. The horses thundered along the track, their coursing bodies obscured by clouds of dust. The curses and yelling of their jockeys were almost inaudible amidst the hoofbeats and the roar of the crowd. Still, Darien could tell that Cyrene was utterly focused on a rapidly approaching turn. As the others slowed to take the sharp bend in their stride, Cyrene spurred harder. With just a finger's breadth to spare, Cyrene and Prince slipped between those ahead, an incredible maneuver. The crowd gasped as one. These skills would do well on the battlefield. Watching Magister Pollona's rider astride their steed was much like watching a boulder roll over a village square. They rode like an absolute lunatic, and unfortunately, Darien's own rider, Cyrene, had fallen victim to the violent and clumsy racing. With an agonizing whinny and a hardful, painful crunch, Darien's horse was battered into the wall of the track. He was certain Cyrene's leg was damaged. It was obviously a break in the rules. Darien would do all he could to convince the officials of such, knocking the jockey out of the race. There was only one lap to go. Prince and Cyrene were performing well, yet Darien knew they had a little more in them yet. The ploy worked. Prince surged forwards as they round the final bend. With one small push, they could make it. Victory. Prince and Cyrene performed wonderfully, and for his troubles, Darien earned over 200 coin, and the dry land name grew in renown. But now came the recital. Darien did not yet qualify, but he hoped to change that. You're going to win this, Darian's caravan master, Ariella, exclaimed, "It'll be trivial, like when you commanded and won the Battle of Kelscombe against Magnar Tormund. You're too much glorious and impressive to fail." It was good to know that his knights had his back. Darian felt unstoppable. Entrants milled around the main tent, warming up vocal cords and memorizing stanzas. Darian's ears pricked up as his name was mentioned, drifting across the gentle breeze. That could be a good sign or a bad one. It was time for Darian to show the world his skill. Wild cheers erupted from the gathering crowd as Callista finished her recital with a flourish and a bow. The only person who wasn't whistling and clapping was Darian himself. How could she have known? Was it planned, or perhaps somehow by the machinations of the Lord of the Seven Hells? It was a simple coincidence that Celeste's verses ended up almost being identical to Darian's own. The assembled spectators fell silent expectantly. It was Darian's turn. He could improvise or call upon the judges. It was clear that his work had been stolen, yet Darian had confidence in his own abilities. It was time to improvise. A choice that ended up in disaster. Yet perhaps things could be salvaged. Trumpets blared, the masses hooped and hollered as Darian ascended the recital dais, waving. A hush fell as he took a heroic stance, as his chest puffed and his arms spread wide. He opened his mouth. It was dry, very dry. He tried to speak, but words would not come out. Why couldn't he speak? A knot in his stomach, unknown mere moments ago, tightened sickeningly, and the throng's muttering gathered. It was time for a distraction, one that helped, if even only a little. Night had begun to fall on the scene, but torches lit the competition. As it continued, Darian talked to himself under his breath, reading his lips for the next round as he reminisced about the happenings so far, like when he had to deal with stage fright. He stepped forwards, ready to take his turn. Ascending the dais, it was time for the final verse. He would regale the crowd with a tale of war and victory. His final verse was well received, but as Darian made his way off the dais, he couldn't help the nagging feeling that he hadn't done himself justice. He was winning. Victory was close, but there were precious few competitors left to go, and even less time. It all came down to one last verse. Claps and applause, trumpets sound, and the crowd clamors. After many trials and some tribulations, and above all else, some truly spirited competition, Darian was placed as the victor, somehow winning out over Archon Regario and the gutsy Recalio, with even more gold, prestige, and renown for his troubles. Next would come the board games. But before the games began, Darian was browsing the wares on display in a tailor's shop. He spied a carefully wrapped package among the piles of garments and sundries. The tailor happily opened it for him, carefully untying the leather bindings to reveal an exquisitely embroidered crest, the Kayanis crest. Darian sought to get one for himself, the Dryland crest, with which he hoped to further his family's renown. It was time, though, for the board game contest to begin. In his first bout, Darian had been paired against his fellow contestant, Magister Rogerio, but not before placing a bet upon himself. The game had barely begun when Rogerio flipped the table with an almighty thwack, sending the kvass pieces flying. Rogerio's mood turned suddenly several moves ago as he realized a simple mistake that he had made had all but decided the game in Darian's favor. Yes, you win, Captain Darian. Happy? He whined. It would have been easier if he had just conceded. Yet Darian was still happy to be the victor. As the games progressed, many were knocked out. Yet Darian now found himself in the quarter-final against Magister Palona. Yet before their game could even begin, Archon Regario caught Palona sabotaging the game. And out she was kicked, leaving only Captain Darian and Archon Regario in the final. Yet it would appear that Darian's grand strategy was falling apart. Regadio was gaining ground fast. If this were a matter of warfare, Darien would be considering a merciful surrender. Yet, he could feel his insides boil with rage and his fists clenched tight enough that they were fit for bleeding. As Regadio reached for his playing piece, his smug eyes met with Darien's, and his face melted into a look of shock and dread. Perhaps Darien could use this moment to intimidate him from making his next move. Yet, that wasn't in the spirit of the game. Darien would not dishonor himself. The margin of victory was small, the cost of errors large. Darien uttered but a few words. "You seem awfully sure of yourself." And it was enough. Darien couldn't help but allow his visage to crack for but a moment and smile as his opponent fell perfectly into a trap he had laid a few moves later. He had pressed the opening into an advantage. It was clear that there was no coming back for Regadio. Darien ground him down, inexorably moving towards victory as his positions weakened slowly but irretrievably. The judges call an end. Darien had won. The tournament was already providing great wealth to Darien, but all of these tasks were improving his knowledge and ability across the board. He was looking more capable than ever, yet all was not well. There was a deep and endless hole in Darien's heart. Cyrene had passed. A constant companion and confidant of Darien's. Her and Renard had been there from the start, teaching him to swing a sword and when to stay the blade. He felt like he had a mortal wound now, from which he would never recover. Darien's hands clasped a note that she gave him, the last note she would ever give him. He realized bitterly. He tried to read it, but all he could do was move it away from his face, so that the precious words contained within it were not washed away by his tears. Though there were a crowd of many mourners around Darien, he had never felt so alone. Even with all the victory, today felt like a hollow day. He found some catharsis there among his peers. "Every dram of my honor," slurred Clavo Oladius, spilling on himself, "belongs with you." Servants tried to restrain him, his friends offering excuses. The drunken knight swatted them away. "Hand me, damn you all. Captain, free me from my tatty master. My oath is yours. Will you have me?" Laughter caught in Darien's throat, for Clavo was a truly famed knight, granted high honors by his liege Rycon Roleplays. This wine-wrought foolery could gain him both a great warrior and a vengeful foe. The gods give and take. May your devotion never sway, though you do. A new knight joined Darien this day. Darien was also in need of a new sworn shield after the passing of Cyrene, so Gavin would step in her stead. And now came the archery tourney. Yet another bet was to be placed. As ever, Darien would be placing it on himself. Darien watched on as the first contestant, Timoth, struck arrow after arrow. Darien needed to find something to do as he awaited his turn, or else he'd lose his mind. He sought to wander off into the crowd to have a chat, learning nothing of great interest. Dusk arrived as Darien focused, calming his heart as much as he might. He was performing well, and victory was close. Only a few more arrows remain at each competitor's feet. The end was at hand, and Darien's chances were high. Yet another victory. A clean sweep to the night of sand and sea. Darien Dryland. Darien winning 4 prizes, as well as experience in the 3 art forms, bow, horse, and wit. And as the band left Tyrosh behind, returning to Dawn, great news from Sarah. She was with child once more. Looking over his prizes, the scepter was a masterful, ornately decorated scepter forged of gold, a true mark of distinction. The finer of the 2 rings had an iron shank with a Trios glass candle engraved into the head of Electrum and was adorned with intricate filigree. The brooch consisted of a zircon cabochon mounted on a Electrum fastener. Back in Sunspear, Darien was ready to revel, where a young wanderer by the name of Griffith joined up, pledging his blade to Darien. It was a wondrous revelry, a celebration worthy of the great knight and his clean sweep at the Tyroshi tourney. Yet Darien still sought work, and found that work in the service to Lady Elaria. There was a jeweled circlet that had been entrusted to Darien and his band. It was to be carried to Sir Timoth. It was a short journey there, yet on the journey back, Darien sought to visit Lys, the great city of Myr, the free city of Pentos, and beyond. Their journey to Spotswood was swift, and for their haste, Darien and the band were rewarded well. Yet this journey would be a long one, and Darien's life while on the sea and trail would be home, as long as his family was with him. From the edge of dawn, they set sail. First of all, traveling to the east, towards the Isle of Lys. The southern seas were far kinder than those in the north. As was the climate, their ship caught the winds and carried them swiftly. Across land they trekked, and all for very good reason. Darien was a worldly man, yet there was still so much of the world to be known. All of his journeys he wished to share, to put pen to page. This Odyssey would no doubt provide a wealth of tales to tell. As the band turned a bend, they came upon a group of people covered in dust, emerging from what must have been an impressive tomb. They hoisted burlap sacks that jingled and jangled, weighed down by the trinkets that they had dug out of the ancient building. These times are hard, dear Captain. Our families must be fed, and we are not doing harm to anyone among the living. Their leader looked at Darien with some trepidation. She clearly realized that this did not look good for them. Times were desperate. Darien was aware as much. He would reimburse them to return the loot from whence it came, forgiving the desperate and the needy. And onwards they traveled, through plain and field. Having his children along for this journey led to them learning much under Darien's careful tutorage. All of his children learning a little more from him now. The city of Myr lay before them. Songs and spices drifted on the wind. Darien was getting better at haggling too, especially when it came to buying provisions. A useful skill to have picked up for a commander of men. The gods that they worshipped out here in the east were different from those at home. The Lord of Light, a god of flame, was common among the cities here. A new poem found its way to Darien, written by Lord Elric of Dawn, that captain of the Dryland Band. Men need not fear as lives depart, though it may tear their grievous apart. And when their final hour nears, their name lives on the lips of peers. There was quite a bit of buzz around the work. Darien saw it to be truly heartfelt. And just as they were to leave Myr, yet another son was born to Darien, gifted with the beauty of his mother. This young one would be known as Daron Dryland. So many sons. What fate awaited each of them? Would they ride dragons? Just like their mother, the thoughts flowed through Darien's mind as the band flowed through Essos. And now they neared Pentos, a city just as unique as the others, each with their own customs, culture, and way of life. The band had one last leg, further to the north, before they began their long voyage home. Even here in the east, they were touched by the cold. Yet they would not linger for long, setting sail and traveling south, dawnwards once more. The free cities had taught Darien much anatomical studies, just one subject he was more familiar with now. It was the 25th of first moon when the band entered the stepstones, the wind carrying them quickly. Onwards towards home, the warmth of dawn welcomed them. And with his great journey complete, Darian sought to bring that all into a book. It would be costly, no doubt, yet it was an artifact he hoped to be able to pass down onto those who came after him. The bright sun, rising over snowy mountain peaks, the effervescent gutters of sprawling cities, the temples harboring the most pious and most wretched souls, the works of men across centuries, nature's wonders crafted by the hand of the seven who are one almighty. Darian has seen it all. He had talked with highborn and lowborn alike, had seen people living in a myriad of ways. Such a trove of astute observations, faultless reminiscences. They would be cherished as a marvel for anyone with but a spark of curiosity. All of it would be written down, a treasure to his family for all time. You will hear it for yourself, and it will surely fill you with wonder. The travels of Darian Dryland were now immortalized in a tome that he would protect like blood of his own. With his great work now complete, it was only right for Darian to seek even more glory, and Lady Lara Dalt of Lemonwood owed Darian a chance to attain it. Lemonwood was but a short distance from Sunspear. It would take a few days before the lady was able to set things in order, yet a tournament here in Westeros would draw many from far and wide. We are in the 100th year after Aegon's conquest. What challenges shall these seven kingdoms bring forth? Darian and his band would find out soon enough. There was to be a joust, a melee, and a duel, all of which would be taking place 3 months from now. Darian and his band of warriors would have time to prepare. It would seem that Lady Lyanna, the Maid of Stars of House Dane, had taken quite a liking to Darian and had offered him her favor in the coming tourney. He would accept it, if for nothing more than honor. The dedication did seem to be more than just a show, however. It was clear to Darian that Lady Lyanna was smitten with the man, and while it did flatter him, he would ask her to abandon the endeavor. He had love, but for one. The months drifted by in Lemonwood, with Darian and Sarah stealing many nights away together, the result of which was now visible. Sarah was with child yet again, right in time for the joust to begin, with Darian placing a bet on himself over even the favorite, Lord Paramount Boromund of the Stormlands. There were many lords taking place, even some hailing from the Stepstones. Lord Melampo was one of them. However, he would not be taking part, after being caught trying to poison Lord Cameron's horse. Sir Aenys and Darian Dryland were first to joust, the sequence of which was almost mechanical to Darian. But as the twin impacts shudder through him, there was a sharp, searing pain along his arm. Blood flowed freely from a livid bicep wound that Aenys' lance sliced along Darian's arm. It was a grave wound. No one would accuse him of cowardice for dropping out now. Yet Darian was made of sterner stuff than that. Banners flickered and flapped in the breeze, stealing away the crowd's breath for a moment as Darian curbed his horse, hoisted his lance, and aimed for the head, hitting his mark. Darian was now to face Lord Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake. Thunk. A sonorous crash of wood against wood signaled Darian's aim to be true, and the force behind it was such that Corlys reeled precipitously before crashing to the ground. Darian curbed his horse at the end of the run and peered down at his adversary. Corlys hauled himself into an upright position, seemingly just winded rather than injured. But his shield lay rent in two on the ground near him. He regarded it sorrowfully, as a valet collected up the pieces, adding them to a small pile that Darian recognized to be his primary and presumably only other shield. Reaching a hand down towards the man, Darian helped him upright. Mounted once more, the two men charged one another, with Darien aiming for the head. Lance meeting helm. Lord Corlys falls. Darien, the victor. That left just one more. The final was to be between Lord Paramount, Bottomond, and Captain Darien. Darien was trotting his horse towards the start mark when something caused him to pause and squint. Unless his eyes deceived him, something truly bizarre was occurring at the other end of the tilting yard. His opponent, Bottomond's valets, were struggling to hoist their lance up to him, and with good reason. The giant weapon was less a lance of wood and more an uprooted tree trunk, a colossal shaft as long as two men. Darien watched in disbelief as Bottomond smugly hefted it, leaning it towards the horse's neck for steadiness. The crowd rumbled with a mix of anticipation and injustice, mixed voices arguing to let it go or protest the unfairness. Darien readied himself. The overgrown sapling would not save Bottomond from Darien's skill. Overcoming the disadvantage, Darien would stick to the tried and true method, aiming once more for the head. Bottomond went down like a clap of thunder, leaving only Darien Dryland atop his horse, victorious. He did not earn as much gold, yet the prestige was just as sweet. Whilst in the tawny yard, Darien happened upon a strangely fitted warrior. Something wasn't right, and sure enough, under the helm, he found a young woman, dressed as a knight and planning to compete as a knight no less. Yet Darien recognized skill where he saw it, and Lyrella here had it. He could do with someone like her in his band. The melee had begun. Amidst the blood and thunder, it was almost impossible to keep one's bearings. The mass of competitors heaved and swayed, an uncontrollable pile of humanity. Woe betide anyone who would stand in its way. And of course, an unfortunate peasant need only move aside with haste to avoid the brawl. The issue was a little more pronounced once Darien considered the victim. The issue now was a little more pronounced. The potential victim was a building. The melee had spilled over to Lemonwood proper, and even now, Darien could see contestants from both sides ripping off pieces of building facades to use as rudimentary shields or even missiles. He was sure he could also hear the crackling of flames in the middle distance. It was enough for now. Darien would call for a truce, and after a small matter of disciplining his son, Darien found himself overwhelmed with stress. He needed an outlet. Athleticism would provide him just that, as he had far more to focus on right now. Returning to the melee, Darien found himself upon horse. He drew closer to Esmond, an opponent of his. He clearly had the advantage. Yet it would be dishonorable to fight in this way, and so he would take to foot. Prevailing in the duel, the shadows loomed as the battle wore on, the fray shrinking as contestants limped away. Back atop his horse, Darien thought back to all that had transpired thus far. The events were finally coming to a head, and he would attempt to win a soldier's victory. His ploy, a stunning blow, the tide shifting in his team's favor. With one more push, they may win yet. Yet the opening was a trap. Darien and his team were defeated. Try as he might, he couldn't lead his team to victory, but the tourney was not over yet. There was a duel to be fought still. Having caught their breath, it was time for the contestants to duel. Lord Melampo of the Stepstones would be Darien's first. And it was clear to Darien that Melampo sought to buy his way out of this fight. Darien would have none of it. Remembering his training, he swung at the man, easily defeating the rival lord. Now he would face Lord Cameron the Valiant Tarth. Time slowed as Cameron's sword arced overhead, the blade singing through the air. It was no insignificant blow. If Darien stood where he was, it would do more than enough damage. The matter should be a simple one, as such a wild attack left the instigator open to a counter, but there lies a nagging feeling at the back of Darien's mind. The grimace snarl Cameron had as he launched the blow was understandable given the effort, but Darian fancied the tiniest glimmer of satisfaction in it. His eyes, too, almost seemed to dart towards Darian's side as he set up the move. Was it all a feint? The blow neared him. It was time to act, and Darian was sure of himself. His counterblow would work, and work it did. Darian, the victor. With the semi-finals over, it was time for a rematch. Lord Paramount Boromund, the Hurricane, versus the daring Darian Dryland. The man baited Darian into attacking, turning away and cheering at the crowd. But Darian would wait. He would not strike him from behind. Remembering his training, he did all he could to defeat the monster of a man. Yet it was not enough. A sonorous blow rang out as the weapon glanced off Darian's helm. With a storm of blows, he fell, confounded and defeated. Yet not all was lost. Winning the joust gained Darian a prize dagger and the chair of many attending. And there, amongst the sand, as they trekked back to Sunspear, Sarah gave birth to Olymer, another son born to the couple. And speaking of sons, Darian the younger had undergone a surgery during the tourney. All had gone well, far better than expected, yet the young lad of 10 and 5 now chose to wear iron, even with all his wounds. Darian the elder saw the strength within his son, saw the fire of his mother within him, and knew that his tale was far from over. He would carry the family name. He would inherit all that was Darian's, and the legacy that comes with it. It was much to live up to, even more so now that Darian's eyes lay upon a new challenge. Lord Melampo, that Darian had met and crossed swords with in the tourney, held the largest portion of the stepstones, not under the influence of the Iron Throne, Dawn, or the free cities of Essos. He ruled from Somberis, a keep that sat between Sunstone and Bloodstone, a keep that Darian had sailed close to on more than one occasion. That keep had caught not only his, but Sarah's eyes too. They could not live life on the road forever, not with so many children, especially those that carried the blood of the dragon within them. They would need a home. And so, as cold winds drift towards dawn, the couple plot and plan in Sunspear. As while Dawn has been safe, that safety may shift. The prince had passed, and now a young boy ruled in his stead. The relative peace that they had known for their years here could change in an instant. And while their desired path would no doubt lead to bloodshed, they did not plan for it to be theirs. One thing was for certain. Whatever path they took now, they would do so together as a family. The Drylands were strong, and for the moment, nothing could come between them. Yet fates can change swiftly. Desire and ambition, forces that drive us forwards, can also drive us apart. The gods so far had been kind. May that kindness continue yet.